Gentlemen, thanks for coming on stage to talk about this. Obviously, programmatic TV seems to be the hottest topic in our space at the minute. Obviously, it's a $600 billion market globally, and everybody wants a piece of it, including Facebook and Google. Just quickly, could you guys maybe define programmatic TV as you see it? I know Mark's had a stab at it, but so let's just have a quick definition of it before we go on, because there's a lot of confusion over IPTV versus programmatic TV. So I'll start with yourself.
Look, I think for me, looking at linear programmatic TV, taking a free-to-air broadcast stream is very difficult to be able to do without some form of set-top box to make it addressable. So for myself, I think it's more around IPTV and how you can make that delivery on a over-the-top stream, rather than looking at a free-to-air broadcaster. I think they're going to be able, they've still got to be able to have one-to-one addressability at each single home, and the guys at MCN have the ability to be able to do that due to set-top box.
So I would define that as addressable TV, not programmatic TV. So I completely agree with what you said, Mark. Just will add one point, which is as soon as you deal with TV, you have one very important fact, which is compliance. So absolutely needs to be data enabled, absolutely needs to automate every part of the process. But the one single thing that people keep struggling with is putting the right ad sequence in order without upsetting the advertiser. And we see it time and time again. That's constantly what will fail in a programmatic TV environment unless you put that at the forefront of your thinking. And so being able to say, between my direct sold ads, between my programmatic ads, I need to have the right sequence, because certainly you don't want you don't want a Toyota ad running next to a Ford ad. You don't want Coke running next to Pepsi, or a sponsor competing with an ad in the break. So the first 2 points that Mark mentioned plus compliance to me define programmatic TV.
Yeah, I'm not going to add too much to that. I think the automation is the sort of the big part. Being able to break down the silos a little bit. Right now we are predominantly buying programmatic on desktop and mobile. We haven't really had the chance to have the TV portion of that speak to the rest of the marketing initiative. The data going into it, I think, is really, really important, and I think making that switch from this steady state linear version to a dynamic standpoint, and making those ads so much more relevant to the audience, neighbor to neighbor, I think for me would be a successful end goal.
Can we talk about in this region specifically? How close are we? I mean, are we seeing significant switch of money from the traditional way of buying, which is sort of like the old school TV buying way, to this new form? Are you seeing that kind of? Is that something you're seeing from your end?
In Southeast Asia, I'd probably have to say no. I think that there are definitely companies out here and publishers alike that are starting to think about it, but we haven't really gotten to that point. And I think some of the challenges really are just so many regions here that we have to still, in a way, almost educate what that is. I mean, we started with the definition of programmatic TV.
Obviously two different opinions straight away, and it's not an isolated thing. I think the whole industry has got different definitions of it.
Yeah, and that's why I'd say it's so important to actually define it right off the bat, because I think there are a lot of terms in the industry that we work in that we might be speaking about the same thing, just referring it to it in a different way. But when you're in Southeast Asia, one of the things that I've sort of quickly learned is you're dealing with so many different markets, so many different broadcasters and publishers. Getting them all on board is a huge challenge, and for that reason, I'd have to say honestly, I don't think that we are too far into programmatic TV just yet. But there is a huge opportunity for it regionally, and I think that the tech is starting to start being developed out a little bit.
So I'll give you two numbers to illustrate a little bit the point compared to how this region might shape up. First of all, TV. We define programmatic, but what is TV? And TV is professionally produced content on any screen, as far as we're concerned. So any live streaming of sports, any live streaming of your most valuable shows on a mobile device or tablet is TV, as far as we're concerned. So from a programmatic perspective, we're seeing in the US about 9% of that inventory being traded programmatically. In Europe, it's about 25%. I don't have enough data points for Asia to speak about the particular market, but I will say that in the case for MCN is very particular because just like Sky in the UK, they are both an operator as well as a channel, and therefore as you go into the world of addressability, when you have the endpoint and you control the endpoint for your own channel, that becomes a lot more synergistic as to what you can do. And so that combination, and that's why MCN is so particular, so is Sky in the UK, so is somebody like Comcast who owns Freewill in the US, owning a channel as well as the end consumer allows you to do addressable TV a lot quicker as opposed to just being a broadcaster running on somebody else's network.
Mark, could you jump in there and talk about the Australian perspective? I mean, how evolved is the market there? Is there real demand from buyers to buy your inventory?
Most definitely, yeah. I mean, I don't want to speak too much of a love-in, but I do obviously totally agree with what Thomas just said. I mean, ultimately, if I can just come back to the definition just for a second, the way that we look at things, we see programmatic TV and addressable TV as two peas in the same pod. We think of them as part of what we like to describe as a data-driven TV advertising continuum. It's all part of data-driven TV advertising, and we're on, as Thomas rightly said, we're on a journey where we're live with programmatic TV in linear today. That's highly successful, tens of millions of dollars sold, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we're also now on a journey towards full addressability, right the way from IP, right the way up to broadcast linear. So there's quite a lot of nuance in this discussion. And you're right, that only certain organisations can hope to deliver the full suite of these things because you need both channels and platforms to do that. And of course, we're lucky enough to be part of that, as indeed Sky is in the UK, and Comcast.
Chris, is there a real opportunity here to make branding money, which is effectively what TV money is, right? Top of the funnel, addressable. And if we make it more addressable, the money will flow. I mean, even more money will flow into this channel. Like, if you can make it more outcome based as opposed to like reach and frequency, which is still a part of the metrics, but actually have some kind of outcome behind it, there will certainly be a flood of money going into this space.
Yeah, look, I definitely think that would be the case. I mean, as we've heard today, every marketer wants to know that where they're spending their money, that someone's actually viewing their ad. It's transparency as well has been a big topic today that's been covered off. So it is transparent. You know that it's been viewed by your particular audience because it's been verified across a number of different data points. So yeah, look, I definitely think that is the case. And the ability to be able to serve, if I'm a pet owner and serve me dog food versus my neighbour who's got a baby and no pet, serve them nappies or something like that, then yeah, definitely.
And then the level, sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's a really interesting report for those that haven't read it, give it a go. By Credit Suisse. It came out in April. I think it's called The Future of Advertising, small topic. But effectively what they talked to was the case for so-called targeted TV, meaning addressable TV. And what they said, looking largely through a US lens admittedly, they said that they thought that TV could start to turn the tables back on the likes of Google and Facebook by
getting... The DO market, basically, having some...
Yeah, exactly, by getting targeted and effectively, therefore, going after below-the-line budgets. This has been something that's been talked about in all the years that I've been in media, and I think at long last we have an opportunity to do that. It's very interesting. I spent some time with Sky.
You have the scale. You have as much scale as they do.
It's not a scale issue, I don't think. I think it's about the data, and it's about the types of people that you have. I was in the UK visiting Sky 2 weeks ago, and what amazed me in the year since I last saw them is how much they've moved this piece of their business on. So they're now looking at, I'm sure they won't mind me saying this, they're now looking at valuing their inventory in a completely different way to the way in which they've habitually done that in the past. And I think you can rest assured that that's where all platform businesses with these sorts of operations, ourselves, Comcast, are going to go as well. And I keep saying to my team, to the point of annoying them, I'm going to ban the use of the word premium. We're going to start talking about right pricing, because ultimately that's what, a right price means. It's the price to drive a clear and identified business outcome.
Yeah, but you're obviously going to have a nice tasty floor there. You know,
Of
you're
course.
not going to sell it for like a penny.
Of course, but everything, Kieran, ultimately is negotiable. The point I'm trying to make is that this isn't free for us. We can introduce the technology, and we are. We've got the data. We've got plenty of that. What we need to do is upskill in areas where we're actually able to talk credibly to direct marketers and the like about new models, new forms of advertising.
There was a slide in your presentation which I found quite useful, because there's almost a period of time now that we're on where, I saw sort of 2020 full addressable, and I saw the words insight next to it, and I think that's the critical piece right now, which is we're not yet, nobody, whoever says they can do full addressable, is lying. But what you can do now is use what you have at your disposal, i.e. set-top boxes and first-party data, to create insights for marketers. And to go back to the brand point, we're starting to see in the US people come back, after a month of a show being on the air and say, maybe I just didn't buy the right audience, because the data is coming back for me to allow to second guess that data and second guess those audiences. And so you now have channels that come back to their brand marketing and say, well, with a different bit of a mix, because of the insights, and it's not addressable. You're not delivering different spots to different people, but you're just saying, in fact, you thought it was 1834, socio demo, and in fact, it's quite a different shift, and therefore, when we're going to reallocate your money for the second and third month of the campaign, we're going to put it here instead.
So what you're saying is the analytics piece is just as important as the execution, that the feedback loop from campaign data and from how your campaign had performed is just as important.
Yeah, and I think Chris was mentioning the fact that it's technically hard to do addressability. And so if you say there's an intermediate step which says, guess what, we still have the connection to the set-top box. We can still retrieve data. Yes, it's hard to push a different ad to a different set-top box. And you mentioned Sky. Sky knows it's expensive to do that. But what you can do is get a lot of information back from that set-top box to inform the brand marketer better.
Yeah, you're obviously on the buy side. Your clients must be delighted with this, like the access they're going to have to the supply and the ability for granular targeting. Is that how are they approaching this? How are they actually preparing themselves for that?
Well, I think we're sort of talking about the data out of this piece, and I think that the data out of it is actually super important. But the data in as well is also very, very useful. And I think we talked about sort of breaking down the silos on how we're managing these campaigns on a global level. We're seeing campaigns being managed, out of Singapore that are, going into the States, the UK, Italy, all sorts of different regions being managed.
You mean the campaigns executed here in Singapore
That's right.
are actually being delivered in those markets?
That's right. And so we talk about the data that they need to leverage in order to make informed buys. And this is like just sort of desktop and mobile right now, but imagine you could do that across TV. And so while MCN is doing some really great things, what about the rest of the world? And that's, again, to make it truly programmatic, you need to have everybody else on board. And obviously, speaking from a sort of platform DSP perspective, the end dream would be able to do this all through one platform. And I think
which would be the Adobe stack. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes,
Stack
ideally.
Adobe, yeah.
Ideally.
But it's quite exciting, though. It does feel to me, I know we're still bringing the two worlds together, but it does feel to me that the old TV world is kind of crumbling a little bit, and the democratization of TV buying isn't nearly upon us. If you saying to us now that being able to plug into someone like MCN from Singapore, you can execute a campaign on behalf of the tourist board here in Singapore, instead of going through an agency in Australia and having layers in between, you can actually go out and buy that media. It's quite an exciting time for the industry as a whole. It does seem to open a lot of opportunities up for new things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where we all want to be at the end of the day. But I think it's going to take a long time to actually get there. It's going to take publishers like MCN to sort of get into that and really start investing into it, because it's not an easy thing to do, right? You have to invest a lot of time, a lot of money into this. You have to make a lot of change. You got to almost influence your entire economy, in Australia. And so when we want to think about programmatic as a whole, TV is a big screen. It's a big screen. It's a big part of programmatic, and it's in a way, it's kind of the final piece right now because I mean, albeit there's challenges, and a lot of the challenges have been talked about today. You know, brand safety, you know, trust, fraud, what have you.
Surely, if you have, you know, you have sources of inventory from the likes of MCN, you can cut the fraud out. I mean, that whole piece goes away.
It's being addressed, and I think that when MCN, like, you know, publishers like MCN make strides to start, I guess, in a way, innovating really. This then leads the way for everyone else to follow suit, and it's going to take some time. But imagine a world where we can run a campaign from Singapore globally and tap into all the great data and publishers out there.
So gentlemen, obviously Freewheel and Zodex work with various publishers across the world. I'm going to talk about like the strategy that your clients are using. Let's talk about how they're preparing for this. I mean, you know, MCM are working with all those publishers, all those TV stations in Australia, and a great amount of investment has been taking place. But surely it'd be interesting to know how your other clients are working globally. So could you guys give us an overview of how some of your clients are preparing for this brave new world, if you will?
So for us, the key word is transparency. We work with operators and broadcasters alike, and connect into demand sources. And between sort of those three parties, the most often cited phrase is, yes, but I don't want to share my data, because it's, you said it yourself, it's your most valuable piece of asset and at your company, and then you work for marketers and agencies who will claim the same. And then the operators will say, well, my set-top box data is also my most important piece of data. So before we can talk about sort of business model and how the strategies come up together, the industry needs to come up with a way to ensure transparency and also protection for that data. This is in the US at least, the reason why programmatic is, from a broadcaster perspective, is still less than 10% of traded medium, is because people still fear the fact that their data is going to cross over to the other side. And I'm not even talking about operators connecting with broadcasters, which is another sort of data exchange, which is critical in my opinion. So that's the keyword that I'll introduce, and I know it doesn't answer your question, but at least I'll give you another point for your next question. But to me, that's the biggest most important point when we talk about strategy with our clients is how do you address transparency and data protection.
How do you address transparency? How do you stop the data going over to the other side, the dark side? Obviously the trading desk.
Thanks for the layup. So we've actually introduced recently a blockchain initiative.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So with a number of third parties, broadcasters, operators, led by Comcast, but very participative initiative, whereby we're saying we're going to create an open ledger for the industry that will enable full transparency amongst the participants to make data and various transactions available, or at least the ledger.
Is that not part of DigiTrust, or are you guys looking to get involved with that as well?
It's separate.
Chris, how are you working with your clients? And
to add to that as well, I mean, SpotX, I think it was two weeks ago, just launched a product called Audience Lock, which for our partnership that we have with Roku out of the US, essentially we had to build for them for that relationship to go ahead. And what that essentially does is protect all of their first-party data. They were very adamant that they didn't want that to cross over to the dark side or the other side, so to speak. So we essentially had to build that product for them, and essentially it strips out all of the unique identifiers and doesn't make that available to the DSPs on the other side.
So this is all very beautiful, and programmatic TV is wonderful, but the fact is the world is a fragmented place. We consume media across multi-screens, different platforms. So how does that, Mark, this is probably a question for you, but how do you fit in a data strategy around that, doing cross-screen targeting, cross-screen attribution? Because this is a question that most of the supply side would be sort of grappling with. How do you string all that together? And if you are so precious about your data, how will you be able to take someone like a tap ad or a cross-screen device and use them to help do sort of cross-screen targeting?
I'm not sure I describe what we do as being precious about our data.
No, obviously not. I think
we're
I'm
protective
just
of our data.
paraphrasing Thomas over here.
But to answer your question, I think going back to SEER, one of the primary use cases underpinning the investment we've made in SEER and we'll make in the future is about answering these big, hairy questions, cross-platform attribution, cross-platform reach and frequency, cross-platform frequency capping, yada, yada, yada. Somebody has to do this. And it's hard. It's hard to do. But if you've got the conditions that we have in the Australian market, you've got a shot. And I'd like to think that that's where we are. Without announcing today, because I can't, who we've decided to partner with on SEER, I can tell you that.
Can we guess who you're partnered with?
No, you can't.
Oh, okay.
An underpinning philosophy behind who we chose was to get at this very point. So whatever else SEER is, as I said earlier on, it's not a conventional DMP, and it is about advanced analytics, because ultimately the only way to answer the kind of questions you've asked about, Kieran, is through high-end, crunchy analytics. So that's where we're going. And again, we're solving for where we perceive the future to be. And the only sure and certain thing there, of course, is we'll get it wrong, but hopefully we won't get it so wrong that we end up throwing it away and starting again. That's where we are strategically.
Kenneth, I'll ask you from the buy side perspective. I mean, the same issues. How does your clients approach that problem as well, particularly the cross-screen stuff?
I mean, I think it's really tough. I think the industry as a whole, I think, is trying to solve that problem right now. And we do have companies like TapHead out there that are trying to help with that. At the end of the day, though, the data is still going to be extremely fragmented. I mean, MCN will have their own data, and it's going to be really good data. It's going to be hyper-targeted. It's going to be extremely relevant, and it's going to solve a lot of ad relevancy problems on their channels. I think, again, what we think about, though, is that MCN won't be the only channel that brands are running on, especially when we start thinking about global branding, right? I mean, they need to be able to have...
Will you be able to pull that data out? I mean, will MCN just be another walled garden, if you will, where once the data goes in, it doesn't come back out? And how do you, because obviously, if Netflix comes out with a product and Amazon comes out with a product and Google has a product and Facebook has a product, suddenly your clients are left with this problem. Well, I have no idea who I'm buying, where I'm buying, how I'm buying. It's an utter shit show. I just may as well just go back to buying traditional TV.
I mean, I think the platforms, anyways, Adobe, we make sure that we protect our partners' data, because we know how valuable it is, right? And at the end of the day, we're just trying to help the clients find a way to have their marketing initiatives across all the channels that they want to be on. Now, we fully understand that a publisher might not want to share their data. Facebook's a very good example of that. We work with Facebook, but we don't get their data out. We just can't, because it's very valuable data. So I think it's really how you sort of integrate with the platforms and the discussions that are had on that level, and the agreement that you come to. We were talking a little bit about the data strategy later. Are they going to sell it separately? Are they going to package it all up? There's various ways to use that data. It really just matters on how you want to strike up that arrangement with the various buying platforms, and at the end of the day, the end client that you're going to be working with repetitively.
I mean, at the end of the day, and I'll take again, apologies for this, a very U.S.-driven example, but it's a $70 billion market with two actors who, quite frankly, don't care how it evolves over the next 5 years. If they can make it shrink to 25 and capture that 25, they'll be very happy, because that's 25 they don't have today.
Who are you talking about?
Can't name them, just
Okay.
like Mark.
Right.
Can't name names here. But the point being, if TV can't solve the cross-screen reassembling of data, that's where they'll come in. And they're coming up with their own metrics right now.
Does it need to be standard across all broadcasters? Because if we have 100 different ways of doing it, it'll be a bespoke solution for each of them. And Mark might have a conversation with Amnet, or might have a conversation with Group M, and it will be different. And that doesn't really help to scale as quickly as we want to.
There's not going to be one single measurement. I think the whole industry's kind of gone down that path. You know, you've got cost per completed views. You've got any types of system now that can, you know, measure and you can sell and plan and forecast against. But you're going to have to do that because no single metric is as good as TV, in the sense that it's delivering the same results. But again, that's exactly the point. If TV cannot come up with a number of metrics, whether it's, you know, between sort of 2 and 10, which fits each market, because, you know, Mark might have one that works very well for Australia based on their panel, based on their set-top box. The UK may have another one, and the US may have another one. But having a global standard is not going to work. You're going to have to be able to sell campaign across different measurements for it to work. And as a tech provider to the industry, we have to be able to support all these so that when you aggregate it all together, you can still plan, forecast, report as one aggregate of all these metrics.
Do you think we'll get to a point where there will be a spot market, or will TV, programmatic TV buying always have its special way, effectively, where it's not quite spot, it's more sort of a week long before it's actually delivered?
Well, it's an audience market. That's what we're trading. I think that's going to accelerate. There's going to be more and more and more audience trading. It's extraordinary coming. I've been in Australia now for a year, just about. And it's extraordinary coming from the UK, where the trading model is as strong as it is, to Australia, where people still derive comfort from buying spots and dots in television terms. And you have to
talk about marketers buying spots and dots.
Yeah, and agencies. It's not just marketers; it's agencies as well. In fact, some agencies make their money.
Well, that's where they make all the money. Yeah.
Exactly, by placing spots and dots on a highly laborious sort of basis. So nobody should be under any illusion. Nobody's going to wave a magic wand and we're all going to move towards audience trading. But our business has really led the charge in moving towards an audience trading future. So I think there's going to be more of that. There's going to be a lot more of that. But is it going to be 100% in the near term? No, it's not.
Can we talk about this specific region for the last question, actually? How do we accelerate the growth of this? I mean, what kind of key problems are here? And how do we address those problems to build the market? Like, so can anybody want to take a stab at that? Would you?
Yep. So,
Mark.
I think one of the things that this region could think about, because it's not something that's happened anywhere else that I'm aware of, is just create forums for platforms and channel providers to get together and start discussing this stuff.
Because like an ATS event.
Yeah, well, yeah,
for
exactly.
TV.
Because
coming soon.
Ultimately, out of those sorts of conversations will come the standards that you talked about, and you can buy this region on a pan-regional basis. You know, if you could do that, then maybe this region could become a kind of flag bearer for where the game's going globally. I don't see any reason why it can't. There are all kinds of complexities about this region, of course, language, etc. But ultimately,
but there still is a lot of big broadcasters in this region, so you could bring them together in some shape.
Big agencies, big channels,
big dreams.
I mean, one of the things that we've seen as being very successful in other parts of the world, which I think here, I mean, I haven't spoken to a few broadcasters, is creating scale through, new device usage. I mean, this is a prime region for mobile accessibility, and creating content and platforms for, reaching consumers in a live environment, which effectively, bring TV on the go. And I know you guys have this in Australia, and we've seen it in the UK, we've seen it in the US. But it's deriving a huge amount of viewership right now. I mean, it's the largest single growth area of content viewing in the rest of the world. And when you start to play in that field, it's TV. It's still TV.
But it's mobile specific, because obviously mobile is the biggest.
It's still TV. Yes, I grant you, it's not linear. It's not delivered through DVB. It's not delivered through a set-top box. But it's still very premium content delivered to me, Mark, Chris, just looking at a program.
But not Kenneth.
He's on the buy side.
Okay.
I got to be careful.
Poor Kenneth, that's not fair.
But literally, you create audience scale through that, and then therefore you're very quickly into programmatic TV and data exchange and things like that, which are much more accessible than linear TV.
I think one of the other keys to tap onto the end of that is that TV, as you mentioned, is across any device, whether it's big screen, small screen, is to think of it as total video rather than just, TV is the big, set-top box that we have at home, stuck on the wall. It's, as you mentioned, it's tablet, mobile, wherever you are on the go.
On that note, gentlemen, we have 19 seconds left. I want to thank you for your time and content, and a round of applause, please, for a fantastic discussion. Thank you very much.